At my sister's wedding they ignored me. "Don't talk to him, he's a failure," I heard Mom say. I just nodded, but then the DJ announced something that made everyone's faces drop. I stood there, just outside the ballroom, staring at the golden glow spilling out from the chandeliers. You know how sometimes you can hear laughter from a distance, and already know it isn't meant for you? That's what it sounded like, warm and bright for everyone else, but cold as ice the moment it brushed against me. I hadn't even been inside 10 minutes when I realized something was wrong. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. It was my younger sister Claire's wedding day. After all, of course everyone would be busy, distracted, caught up in the celebration. But then I noticed the looks. The way a group of cousins glanced my way and then turned their shoulders so I couldn't join their circle. The way an uncle clapped my shoulder and, without a word, peeled off in the opposite direction. Even the people at the coat check couldn't meet my eyes. That was the first sign. I told myself to brush it off. Weddings are chaotic. People forget their manners. But as I walked into the reception hall, the truth started to sharpen in focus, like a camera lens pulling in on an unpleasant scene. And it wasn't long before I heard something I wish I hadn't. I was standing by the far end of the bar, holding a glass of water just to give my hands something to do, when it happened. The band was still warming up, soft music threading through the chatter, and I'd almost convinced myself that I was imagining it, that I was just being sensitive. Then, like a cruel gift from the universe, I heard my own name. It came from behind a curtain of voices near one of the round tables. A low, urgent whisper, my mother's voice, sharp even when she tried to soften it. "Don't talk to him," she said. "He's a failure." For a second, I actually thought I'd misheard. I turned slightly, careful not to be noticed. Through a gap in the crowd, I saw her leaning toward Aunt Margaret, her gloved hand cupped like she was passing along a state secret. Margaret nodded, lips pressed tight, and shifted her chair so her back was to me. The words hit harder than I thought they could. Not because I hadn't heard them before, in other forms, comments at Christmas, sighs over phone calls, but because of the timing. On a night when families were supposed to be proud of each other, my own mother had chosen to erase me. I didn't make a scene. I just stood there, staring at the condensation sliding down my glass. I don't know how long I stayed like that, my face perfectly calm while, inside, something folded over itself. And here's the strange thing, no one else noticed. Or maybe they did and pretended they didn't. People bustled around me, balancing drinks and plates, laughing in little clusters. Someone brushed my shoulder without even looking back. I made my way to a small table tucked in the corner, half hidden behind a column, and stayed there. Through the entire dinner. The entire toast. Forks clinked, champagne fizzed, and I sat there, a ghost at my sister's wedding. No one asked me to join their table. Not even a cousin. The seat beside me stayed empty like a warning sign. I told myself I wouldn't ruin the night for Claire. So I smiled politely when people passed, even though most of them avoided my eyes. The photographer didn't even raise a camera in my direction. By the time the dancing started, I could feel the weight of the whole night pressing down on me. I thought about slipping out, just disappearing before anyone noticed. They wouldn't miss me. Why would they? I was halfway to the door when the speakers squealed, and the DJ's voice boomed through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "before we get too deep into the night, we have a very special announcement from someone you might not expect." I stopped. My name was the next thing out of his mouth. "David Pierce, could you please come up to the stage?" Every head turned. The room went quiet, except for the soft scrape of my chair as I stood. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. My own name, echoing off the ceiling of the ballroom, sounded foreign. Every face had turned toward me now, faces that, an hour earlier, couldn't even bear to meet my eyes. Forks paused halfway to mouths, wine glasses froze midair. The music had cut out, leaving only the DJ's voice still hanging in the space like smoke. My first instinct was to wave it off, to shake my head and retreat. But the DJ was grinning from ear to ear, and there was no easy escape. A murmur rippled through the tables as I stepped out from behind the column and began the long walk toward the front. It felt like walking on a thin bridge over a canyon. My shoes sank into the thick carpet, every step deliberate. I could feel their eyes on me, curious, some pitying, some openly confused. My mother's face, especially. She looked irritated, like this moment was somehow an inconvenience to her. Claire, my sister, glanced at me over the rim of her champagne glass, a question in her eyes. I took the steps up to the stage, the lights washing over me. For a moment, all I could hear was the sound of my own pulse in my ears. The DJ handed me the microphone, leaned in, and whispered, "You ready for this?" I nodded. And just like that, all the quiet planning I had done in the weeks leading up to tonight came flooding back. See, I had known this was how it would be. This cold shoulder, this invisible wall. That whisper I overheard tonight? I had heard it long before, just never so clear. And I had decided, I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't argue. If they thought I was invisible, I would wait until this one moment, in front of everyone, to make them see me. I looked out at the room and let the silence settle, heavy and expectant. "First," I said slowly, "I want to congratulate my sister and her husband. Tonight is about them." There was a polite wave of applause, but it sounded muted, wary. People were waiting, leaning forward. "And second," I continued, "I know some of you are probably wondering why I'm standing here at all. To be honest, I wondered that myself for most of the evening." The crowd shifted uneasily. My mother straightened in her chair. "But," I said, pausing just long enough to make them lean in, "there's something I've been keeping to myself. Something I came here tonight to share with the people I love, whether or not they see me the same way." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded envelope, holding it up so everyone could see. The envelope looked small in my hand, just an ordinary white rectangle, but it had weight to it. 2 years of quiet work folded into a single piece of paper. I held it up, and for a moment, all you could hear in that hall was the soft hum of the ceiling lights. "This," I said, "is something I've been working toward for a long time. I didn't talk about it. I didn't brag. I just put my head down and did the work." A few people in the crowd exchanged puzzled looks. My mother tilted her head, almost sneering, like she was waiting for a punchline. "I know most of you see me as the one who never quite measured up. I know what was said about me tonight. And that's fine." I glanced toward the corner table, where I had been sitting all evening. "But there are things you don't know." I took a breath and opened the envelope. Slowly, deliberately, I unfolded the document inside and held it up to the light. The DJ, catching on, stepped closer with a spare mic so I didn't have to shout. "This," I said, "is the paperwork for a gift. For Claire and Michael, in celebration of their marriage. It's the title deed to a house, one I bought outright. The keys will be in your hands by tomorrow morning." The room fell into absolute silence. For a moment I thought maybe I hadn't spoken loud enough. Then I saw Michael's mouth drop open, and Claire press her hand to her face as tears welled in her eyes. "And just so there's no misunderstanding," I continued, my voice steady, "this isn't a loan. It isn't something I expect back. It's my way of saying, even if you don't believe in me, I still believe in you." I laid the deed down on the DJ's table. "I built my own company these last 3 years. It did better than anyone expected. And while everyone here may have thought of me as a failure, I wanted my first big act of success to be something that mattered." The quiet that followed wasn't comfortable. It was stunned, raw, like the air had been pulled out of the room. I could see my mother now, sitting rigid in her chair, color draining from her face. "I'm proud of where I am," I said, stepping back from the mic. "And tonight, I just wanted to share that, not for applause, but so maybe someday you'll look at people a little differently before deciding what they're worth." I handed the microphone back to the DJ. The DJ took the microphone back slowly, like he wasn't sure what to do next. I stepped away from the speakers and for a moment there was just silence. A big, heavy silence that settled over the room like dust. Claire was the first to move. She stood up, almost knocking her chair over, and walked toward me with her hands over her mouth. When she reached the stage, she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. I had no idea, she whispered, voice shaking. I know, I said. That was the point. Michael followed, his face still stunned, and shook my hand like he didn't know how else to express himself. Behind them, people were still frozen, their forks and glasses suspended in midair, as if the entire reception had been paused. Then the murmurs began. Low at first, just a ripple moving through the tables. You built a company? He bought them a house. I thought he was barely getting by. Everywhere I looked, there were faces I'd known my whole life, only now they were looking at me like they didn't recognize me. Except for one. My mother hadn't moved. She sat very still, her napkin crumpled in one hand. For a moment, her eyes met mine. There was no apology in them, no sudden warmth. Just shock, and something else, a flicker of panic, maybe, as if the words she'd whispered earlier were echoing back to her. I didn't wait for her to speak. I didn't need her approval anymore. Instead, I turned back to Claire and Michael. Enjoy your night, I said softly. This is yours. Everything else, that's for them to think about. And with that, I stepped down from the stage. No one stopped me as I made my way through the hall. The same cousins who wouldn't meet my eyes an hour ago parted to make room. Even the photographer lowered his camera. It was like the whole room had shifted, like some invisible weight had moved from me to them. I didn't stay to watch what came next. I walked through the side door, the cool night air hitting my face like a blessing. Outside, the music started again behind me, muffled now, and I kept walking until it faded into nothing. The parking lot was empty except for a few cars scattered under the dim glow of the street lamps. The air was cold enough to make my breath visible, and for a moment I just stood there with my hands in my pockets, letting the silence wrap around me. Inside, I could hear the muffled thump of music starting up again, like nothing had happened. But it had. I could feel it in my chest. A weight I'd been carrying for years had shifted, and I didn't realize how heavy it had been until it was gone. I walked slowly to my car, my shoes crunching on the gravel at the edge of the lot. Every step felt strangely light. There was no anger left in me. Not even sadness. Just a sort of calm. When I sat behind the wheel, I didn't start the engine right away. I leaned back, looking out through the windshield at the empty stretch of road beyond. I thought about Claire's face, the surprise, the tears, and how for a moment it felt like I had finally given her something no one could take away. I thought about the room's silence, the whispers afterward, the way the people who had avoided me all night had suddenly seen me. And then I thought about my mother. Her words at the table, "Don't talk to him, he's a failure," would have broken me once. But tonight, they only reminded me of how far I'd come on my own. I started the engine. The headlights carved a pale tunnel into the night as I pulled out of the lot and let the road stretch ahead of me. The radio was off. I didn't need noise. I just needed the hum of the tires on asphalt and the feeling of leaving that hall behind. Somewhere along the way, I rolled down the window and let the cold air rush in. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The road stretched out ahead of me like a ribbon, no other cars in sight. With every mile that passed, the tension I'd been holding in my shoulders for years began to ease. I kept thinking about the question no one asked me tonight: why didn't you tell anyone? Why keep it all a secret? The truth is, I'd learned early on that in my family, words didn't count. Promises didn't count. Only results. And even then, the results had to be what they wanted for them to matter. So, 3 years ago, when the idea for the company first started, I said nothing. I worked the late nights, saved every dollar, skipped holidays and dinners, all while everyone assumed I was just drifting. And you know what? I preferred it that way. It was quiet. Nobody expected anything from me, so I could finally expect something of myself. There were nights, though, when that silence hurt. When I'd sit alone in my tiny apartment with its peeling paint and second-hand furniture, and wonder if maybe they were right about me. If maybe there was nothing more to me than the quiet disappointment they'd always seen. And then one day, almost without realizing it, I wasn't wondering anymore. The company took off. A few good breaks, the right people, and suddenly I was building something bigger than myself. I had employees, offices, clients who trusted me, I kept telling myself, when the time is right, they'll see. Tonight was that time. And now that it was done, I felt strangely untethered. Like I had been waiting for this moment, but the moment was never for them. It was for me. The headlights lit up the sign for the highway exit that led home. I turned, the quiet hum of the tires on the asphalt almost hypnotic. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to defend myself to anyone. By the time I pulled into the small parking lot of my apartment building, the night had deepened into that strange, still hour where the world feels emptied out. The air smelled faintly of rain. Street lights hummed above me, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. I cut the engine and just sat there with my hands on the steering wheel. Inside the car, it was quiet. No music, no phone buzzing, just the dull ticking sound of the engine cooling down. I could feel the heat in my chest where the adrenaline had been, slowly dissolving now that the moment had passed. For months, no, for years, I had rehearsed what tonight might feel like. I thought there would be triumph. I thought I would be giddy watching the surprise on their faces, maybe even a little smug. Instead, all I felt was tired. Tired in a way that goes down to the bones, the kind of tired that comes from carrying something alone for too long. I climbed out and made my way upstairs to the second-floor apartment. The stairwell smelled faintly of someone else's dinner. Inside, the place was as quiet as it always was. Sparse, a little plain, but mine. I didn't even bother to turn on the lights at first. I set my keys down on the counter and walked to the window, pushing it open. Cool air spilled into the room, brushing against my shirt. From here I could see the city spread out in patches of yellow and white. Somewhere out there, the wedding was still going on. The music would have started back up. People would be dancing again, laughing like the evening hadn't been split in two. I leaned against the frame and let my thoughts drift. What stuck with me most wasn't my mother's face, or the way the room went silent, or even the applause that came after. It was Claire's hug, the way she clung to me as though, for the first time in a long time, she saw me. And maybe that was enough. Maybe everything else, the whispers, the looks, the years of being invisible, mattered a little less because of that one simple thing. But I couldn't help thinking about the rest of them. About the cousins who had turned their shoulders, the uncles who couldn't meet my eyes, the people who had written me off because it was easier to follow the version of me my mother had invented than to see the truth. And I realized something. I didn't need them to change their minds. I didn't need their approval. That thought, surprisingly, was the most freeing part of all. I sat down on the edge of my bed, shoes still on, and let out a long breath. The room was quiet, just the sound of cars on the street below, and the occasional creak of the old building settling. The house was theirs now, the one I bought. My gift to them was already out in the world, a new door waiting to open. But my life? My life would move forward too, without waiting for them to catch up to who I had become. For a long while, I just sat there, staring at my own hands. They looked different tonight, steady, not restless, like they finally belonged to someone who knew where he was headed. The next morning, I woke to the faint buzz of my phone on the nightstand. It had been going off all night, calls, messages, notifications, but I'd silenced it before falling into the deep, dreamless sleep that only comes after a long battle you didn't know you'd been fighting. Sunlight spilled across the floor as I sat up and scrolled through the screen. There were dozens of missed calls, most of them from numbers I knew by heart. My sister. My father. Even a couple of cousins who hadn't said a single word to me in years. The messages came in waves. David, I don't even know what to say. Call me. Last night was incredible. I can't stop crying. Thank you? That one was from Claire. Then others. I think we need to talk, son. Please don't ignore me. And one from my mother, just 5 words, sharp and brittle. We need to discuss your behavior. I set the phone down and let the morning quiet stretch around me. In the past, a message like that from her would have hooked me immediately, pulling me into a cycle of explanation, defense, and apology for things I hadn't done. But now there was nothing left to explain. Everything that needed to be said was already said, under the bright lights of that wedding hall. I made coffee, black and strong, and stood at the window with the mug cupped in my hands. Down on the street, a delivery truck pulled up, the driver hopping out, unaware that for me, life had just shifted in some irreversible way. By noon, the phone buzzed again. This time it was Claire. I hesitated. Then I answered. Her voice came through shaky at first. David? Morning, I said softly. I don't even know how to thank you, she said. Michael and we didn't expect any of that. You didn't have to. I wanted to, I interrupted. That's all that matters. There was a long pause. Then she said quietly, I didn't know they treated you like that last night. I didn't hear what Mom said. If I had. I smiled faintly, even though she couldn't see it. You had enough to think about. And it doesn't matter now. It does, she said. It does to me. We talked for a while, about small things, her honeymoon plans, the house they'd move into in a few weeks. But under all of that was something new, a thread of respect that hadn't been there before. When we hung up, I knew things between Claire and me would be different from now on. Better. The rest of the family was another matter. I let the other calls go unanswered. The voicemails from my father were long, meandering, trying to find a gentle way to ask for a meeting. My cousins' messages were short, all apologies they never would have given without an audience. And my mother? She left one voicemail and then nothing else. Her silence was loud in a way only hers could be. That evening, I sat down with a notebook, a habit I'd picked up when the company was just an idea, and I started to write. Not plans, not goals, just a list of what I wanted the next few months to look like. There was a clarity in me that I hadn't felt before. I wasn't going to chase them. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for someone to acknowledge me. If they wanted to come to me now, they would have to come honestly, not out of guilt, not out of curiosity. And if they didn't? That was fine too. I closed the notebook and set it on the table. Outside the window, the city was lit up in scattered points of yellow, the same city that had once felt so lonely. Now, somehow, it felt like my own. For the first time, I realized something simple but freeing. I had spent years wishing for a seat at their table, and last night, when I finally stood in front of all of them, I understood that I'd already built my own. Looking back now, it wasn't about the house or the company. It wasn't even about proving them wrong. It was about finally understanding that their opinion of me had never defined me. If I learned anything from that night, it's this: sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's living in such a way that you no longer need anyone else's permission to feel proud of yourself. To anyone who's been where I was, unseen at your own family's table, remember this. Build your own table. And when you're ready, stand. One day, they'll have no choice but to see you. And by then, you might just find you no longer need them to.